Hello and welcome everyone for the fourth and final ELCA Churchwide Assembly Bible study session on the theme Embody the World, where we explore the meaning of embodiment in Luke chapter 24 one last time, which is pretty exciting. Wonderful to have you all here and welcome again. And it's great to be here, your moderator for this last session. My name is Sally Azar, and I will be here and moderating today's session with Denise Rector, which we are very fortunate to have. She's offering her reflection on our theme. We'll start with a 30-minute pre-recorded presentation, and then Denise will join us online to answer your questions about the text and the theme. Denise is a doctoral student at the Lutheran School of Theology in the fields of womanist theology, race, and history. Her dissertation explores the feedback loop between historiography and epistemology concerning the construction of African American racial identities throughout US history and in the Church. She earned her Master of Divinity from Wartburg Theological Seminary, Iowa in 2018, and her Master of Theology from LSTC in 2021. Beginning this fall, she will be the first doctoral scholar in residence at Trinity Lutheran Seminary at Capital University in Columbus, Ohio, and we're very happy to have her today. Before we start the pre-recorded presentation, there are a couple of notes that we want to share with you. When you look at your Zoom screen, you'll see three controls: audio settings, which lets you switch playback speakers on your device. Another thing is the chat, which lets you send a message to the Zoom host if you need help with a technical question. We'll also use the chat window to share information with the group, like the link in today's session's handout and the guidelines, which we'll paste there now, which we already now have in the chat. And the main control you'll be using today is the Q&A button to ask your questions in the session presenter. Now I am pleased to introduce the presentation portion of today's session with Denise.
I was so excited to learn about the theme, Embody the Word, because I've been on a little bit of an embodiment kick lately, thinking about how bodies show up in society, thinking about how my body shows up in society, thinking about the things about bodies that get named, thinking about things that are left unsaid, that get assumed. It's just all of that's been a really rich line of thought for me. But the phrase embody the word is interesting and is also a little abstract, a little vague. So one of the things that it can mean to me is when I think of embody the word, my question is, how are my actions manifesting what God wants for the world? How are my actions, the things I do with my abilities and my resources, manifesting what God wants for the world? And if you're listening to this, the one thing that is not coming across in audio is that I am moving my hands, I'm moving my shoulders, I'm referring to this physical space that my body is taking up. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit as we continue this discussion of the body as a symbol. And I'm hoping that talking about the body as a symbol can help expand our thinking and expand our faithfulness, maybe expand our understanding of theology in a way that will help us embody the word more faithfully. So like I said, embodiment is kind of subtle, a little hard to pin down. I'm using it to mean how we relate to each other in the world and how we relate to the created world, and also how our actions are manifest in the world. I love our Lutheran intellectual tradition, and at the same time, I'm going to push that a little bit. And I want to bring in and lift up the ways that putting ourself, our body into the story can help us bring some deeper empathy, maybe some extra sympathy. I should probably say sympathy, actually. A way to foster sympathy and a deeper understanding of other people and situations and issues. I am a womanist Lutheran theologian. Womanist Lutheran theologian. I believe that the way I am made, my embodiment, my physicality, the way I am in creation as a co-creator, all of that impacts my perception of God and how I see God working in the world. And it also gives me some critical legs to stand on as I look at questions of faith, questions of worship, and questions of justice. So is that sort of as an intro? We have the text of the two walking on the road to Emmaus. So they are walking on the road to Emmaus, and Jesus comes to them and they're changed. So the root word body as sort of a frame for this scripture opens up a lot of possibilities, but I want to be sure that it doesn't shut down any possibilities. And to do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about bodies and ability and disability theology. And then I would like to talk about the idea of disability theology, womanist theology, these sorts of theologies alongside what you might consider capital T theology. So just stick with me for a minute and I will sort this all out. So the physicality of the body isn't necessarily the same as the ability of the body. So I want to separate those things a little bit to make room for those who don't have the same abilities as others. I talked about assumptions a little bit earlier, and we don't want to assume that all bodies can do the same things. So even though I am talking about these bodies walking in the text, I want to make space for these different abilities. My advisor at Lutheran School of Theology in Chicago, Dr. Linda Thomas, has a really nice way of doing this in class. As part of her introduction of herself, she calls herself temporarily abled. And that really struck me. It's a really compelling thing to say. So if the field of disability theology is a growing field that I am looking forward to learning more about, and it exists because the theology that is sort of the what we might call normal capital T theology, when people with disabilities went to that theology with questions, looking for gospel, looking for themselves, they were not able to see themselves in a way that was life-giving. So that sort of raises a question that I really want to put a fine point on, because I've talked about disability theology and I've talked about womanist theology. So these theologies that are looking at a person and their life experience, these are important because these lenses become ways for us to understand not only God in creation, but for us to understand how we relate to each other. And so what does it mean that we have a field called womanist theology or a field called disability theology? Why isn't just the regular capital T theology doing it? Sort of making that connection that, say, I would need to really feel like I am present in God's unfolding story. Capital T theology has a focus, just like womanist theology has a focus, or mujerista theology has a Latina focus, or Minjung theology may have an Asian diasporic force focus. Capital T theology has a focus as well. We just don't talk about it as much, so that the cultural sort of underlyings of the capital T theology become normal, but they still don't fit certain people in society. And so my point here is that part of the embodying is also what God has brought for us to understand each other, not just ourselves, but also each other, and to serve each other in a way that is faithful and just. So this is partially all around the idea of body. And I'm going to complexify things just a little bit by talking about intersectionality, because none of us is just one thing in our body. Like those of you who can see me can look at my body, and I look like a Black female, an African American Black female. I can open my mouth and speak and probably confirm some of the assumptions that you might make on seeing my person. Everybody has these sort of little recipe script type assumptions in their head about people. I happen to be lifting up my gender and my race right now, but those scripts are about all sorts of identities that we all have. And we have made historical, social, theological assumptions about those identities that it's just really important to be faithful about, and it's important to have conversation about them. I'll lift up just two quick examples. If I were to speak to a person who is considered white in our society, they might identify as white. They might also identify as German. They might also identify as male. They might also identify as 6 feet tall. All of those identities come with assumptions. If I need something off the top shelf, I'm going to look for somebody who's 6 feet tall, because I am not that tall and can't reach the top shelf. Those assumptions become problematic when they are used to marginalize or oppress. Obviously, you probably saw that that is where I was heading in this talk. So theologically, how we express our God-given identities, how we live out our expressions, all of those things run up against everybody else's expressions and intersectionalities. And if we haven't critically thought through what it means to be just to the whole of somebody's identity, we can find ourselves running into problems. The person that I just described, who is German and male and 6 feet, will believe all those things about themselves, and what society may focus on for them is their whiteness, even though they are like, I am German. Same with me. If I were, say, not from the US, but from, say, Tanzania, but I was walking around the US, there may be, I may run into some cognitive dissonance with someone expecting me to act as an African American as opposed to a Tanzanian. So these are how some of these intersections of identity can overlap, in how the assumptions that our experience has given us can cause some problems. Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw is the creator of intersectionality theory, and I would absolutely recommend looking at her TED Talk on that to get an idea of what it means to live at an intersection where those identities at the intersections are oppressed. All of that sort of intersectional discussion, that disability, womanist theology versus capital T discussion, so much of that is about how we show up in the world. So much of that is about embodiment, about how we perceive others' embodiments, about what the concept of embodiment means to us, and how we live that out in our daily lives. I was going to say in our theological lives, in our church lives, it's all one life. Like there's not like a bunch of different hats. It's one hat. So this way of acting faithfully is something that is all 162 hours of the week, not just the one on Sunday. And brings up the it brings up the issue of how we classify people or how we categorize people and how we even talk about people. It's easy for me to say issues of disability theology because I happen to be temporarily able at this moment. What is an issue that may come across my screen or news feed is somebody else's 24/7 embodied experience. So there are just so many rich avenues that this leads to when we talk about embodying the word. And for better or worse, as an academic, I love to ask questions that generate questions. And so I'm going to ask a couple of questions now that for this space can be rhetorical, but that I also would like to sort of like have them sit in the back of your head or like sit with your heart as you are having coffee or reading the news or preparing to attend assembly or looking at what you are voting on in assembly. These questions, while rhetorical, have very real world implications. So I really want to make that connection. So here are some of the questions that come up as we think about embodiment, intersectionality, and society and faithfulness. We have these two people walking on the road to Emmaus, and we see they are sad. Luke's a wonderful writer, doesn't leave that part out, tells us they're feeling in their body. I believe that might be Brene Brown. I might be misquoting it. I wish I knew the right person and don't want to take credit for it, but feelings are things we feel in our body. So this feeling part of them being sad is important. So given all of that, I ask, whose bodies are sad in society today? And does that impact the decisions made at churchwide assembly or that you make in your congregation? Whose bodies are journeying between cities? Who's walking? Whose bodies are in danger in society today? Do you feel like your body might be a body in danger? And if so, what does the phrase embody the word mean to a person whose body might be in danger in society? And if you don't feel like your body is in danger, if maybe this is a little like if you would like something a little more intellectual, or you don't feel like your body is in danger, then what does that mean if you are asked to embody the word, but you feel safe enough maybe to do that? What does it mean for you when you see yourself represented in the Bible? Are you a person who maybe has not seen yourself represented in the Bible? And what does that mean? What does theology generally say about people like you? Does it say anything at all? Is it generally positive or generally negative? How does embodying the word work to help us serve our neighbor? I think that's a particularly Lutheran question, given the freedom of a Christian idea that we are freed in Christ to serve our neighbor. Maybe this is something to consider as we consider our bodies and how they move and work and are the locus of action in society. What does it mean to think about that alongside serving the neighbor? So I really hope that these questions lead to some deep discussion and also a deeper understanding and sympathy, and a deeper faithfulness. Our bodies, regardless of ability, are where we meet each other. And being a site of action, our bodies are also a reminder of our accountability to each other. And regardless of our ability, regardless of where we meet each other, regardless of our experience in our body, our experiences with other bodies can serve as an expansive lens, not only for theology, but for how we put that theology into practice. May God bless us as we accompany each other along the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on the theme, Denise. It was so wonderful to hear from you. And thank you for joining us, everyone, for this question and answer portion of the webinar. Welcome, Denise. First of all, we're happy to have you here, and we're happy that you're going to answer a couple of questions that we're going to receive from the Zoom chat.
Hi, Sally. It's so good to see you. Wonderful to be with you in this digital space. It's so good to see you.
Same here. Yeah, so I'm pleased to have that we have 133 viewers right now. And I kindly ask you all to post your questions and reflections about the theme, and Denise will answer the questions meanwhile, and I'll be moderating throughout the session. We will try to answer as many questions as we can. But because I have the privilege of introducing you and hearing moderating the session, I was throughout the session, I was thinking the whole time, this is so true, and this is so relevant to our daily lives, because this is mainly how we're encountering with each other. We're seeing each other, but we don't really know that much about each other. So we put many labels in our heads, and you uplifted a lot of things that we should also think about. What are we gonna uplift in our lives? What is important for us? And you especially put strength on the term womanist. And I wanted to ask, what is something that made you, or what was this one point that was like, that's my limit, that this is why, So I was a bit curious.
This is the point, right? Like which thing. There was something about the definition of what a womanist is, which is the definition that Alice Walker, who does not, as far as I understand, identify as Christian. So that's important. She is African American, but she doesn't identify as Christian, but she does identify as womanist, tapping into a spirituality that not only was meaningful for her, but that resonated through many different types of religious experience. There was something about the very real experience that Black women in America have, that I think maybe wasn't quite named the way that Alice Walker named it. And when the Christian ethicist Katie Geneva Cannon, who's Presbyterian, picked up the idea of womanist theology as a Christian and started to flesh out the importance of history and experience in the very particular intersection that is being African American and female in the US. It just resonated so much. And I have just been so interested in finding the spiritual pieces that help explain my experience, seeing the things that resonate across generations, across religious and faith traditions with people who share the skin tone. And there's just something, there's just a little bit of a call that was answered, sort of like call and response. You hear the call and you're like, oh, that's me. I need to respond to that. And that is the sort of spiritual tuning, I guess, that womanist theology does for me. And to hold that beside a Lutheran understanding of justification and grace and service is just really fruitful.
That's wonderful. It's really great to hear from you. I'll take up the first question from Sue, and she is asking, you make a deliberate choice to use sympathy instead of empathy in your presentation. I wonder how you differentiate between the two.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. And thank you for that question. From my understanding, which is maybe just a couple of inches above pop psychology, not a trained psychologist or psychiatrist, I want to say that. But from what I have learned, the difference between sympathy and empathy, one of those differences is like experience. I can sympathize with someone who is who has a broken leg. I don't believe I can empathize with them because I have never broken my leg. I haven't lost that. I haven't had that particular thing happen. So the difference for me between sympathy and empathy is empathy implies having shared experience, as opposed to, my heart can go out to somebody, but if I haven't had the shared experience, it's just a little different. So I'm just making that distinction.
Yeah, that's very legit, I would say. Tonya is asking, I'm not quite getting the temporary abled phrase. Can you clarify what it means? Thank you.
Okay, sure. So I'm going to answer the temporarily abled phrase with my interpretation. So this is something that I mentioned that I heard my my current advisor, my PhD advisor, professor at LSTC, Dr. Linda Thomas, say, but this is my interpretation. Temporarily abled is a way to note the fact that not everybody has the same ability, and that even me in my embodiment, my level of ability might change. I think that particular phrase resonated with me because it helped me realize that the state of being abled is not, it isn't necessarily a norm, like to just sort of take it out of the state of it being a norm and have it be, well, this is a thing that might change. And if that changes, it's certainly going to change how I am in the world. And for me to have a certain ability at this moment doesn't mean that I will always have it. And so there's just that phrase struck me as a sort of radically honest phrase. And it helped me start to see some of the ways I assume my ability and some of the ways, frankly, that I'm ableist and need to sort of check myself and be sure that I am I'm respecting all sorts of abilities. So that's what I was trying to get across in sharing that phrase from my advisor.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad. I mean, it's very important because we're all coming from different contexts and we have different backgrounds. So we should always keep that in mind. We all have different ways of perception, but I think you explained it very well that we can put ourselves in your shoes kind of and see it from your perspective. So it's great.
And may I say one more quick thing about that, Sally?
Of course.
Okay, thanks. And I didn't mean to cut in and jump you off.
No,
Thanks
wait,
for letting me
go
jump
ahead.
in. So the thing about experience that I wish I'd been a little bit clearer about, but that I can be clear about now, in my mind, experience, and someone may have already asked this question, so sorry, there's a question in the Q&A that this is coming up. Experience, sort of at the end, that's talking about like this experience is sort of being like our bodies being the locus of experience, right? I don't know a lot about performance theory, but I have a lot of PhD friends who study performance theory, and they can definitely talk more about that. The thing about bodies and experience is that experience gives us a way to check for justice. So like big picture, justification by grace through faith, justified and justification so that we are free to serve the neighbor. So, as one of my Lutheran pastors will say, okay, so we're justified. What now? Not to be flippant about God's grace and God's glory, not that way, but when you like since we've been justified, well, kind of like what else do we do? Well, we serve the neighbor, right? That's the Lutheran answer to that. We are justified to serve the neighbor. This is what all of freedom of a Christian is. Well, so like, how do we know like about that service? My 2 cents is that is where the justice piece is. Like if we're serving and working towards a world that God loves, then justice is part of that. And so that is the point that I was trying to make about experience, embodiment being a place where justice can be checked on.
Yeah, I think that's great, and thank you for taking up that question. I'm reading a comment from Thomas Horn. Your presentation was very good. It brings up a lot more questions that I can type here. My mind was racing through different scenarios that address your presentation points, and I am excited to use your thoughts while attending the church-wide assembly. Thank you. And then Glenn Mitchell mentions, this was an eye-opening looking at categories and ways perceptions and that can be received. Is it difficult in your walk to be perceived incorrectly?
Is it difficult in
your walk
to be perceived incorrectly? That is such an interesting question. It can be really, I think it can be really frustrating for anyone when they're misunderstood. But the perceptions that I think any human brings to a situation sort of comes from an already present schema. So there's taking sort of into account sort of what people bring when they show up with a thought or an idea. And so, yeah, there is also a lot of room for what is a faithful way to show up? What is a faithful way to respond? And then back to the question, then how do I faithfully react to the response? So yeah, there's a lot of nuance there. And it can be difficult for a person to be perceived incorrectly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So how do we best live into this theology given where the ELCA has been historically, is asked by John.
This is a really good, this is the question, right? As Sally mentioned in the introductions, I've been at a couple of Lutheran educational institutions, and I happen to know that a couple of them have been doing, I'm gonna talk about some of the racial justice work just because that is a passion of mine. And as Sally read in the intro, is also where some of my dissertation scholarship is. I've been very, very pleased to see whether it's racial justice that is in the office of the presiding bishop at the ELCA. So that's very important. You know, if you have a topic that sort of is housed in the bishop's office, then it is it's very important. I've seen several of the ELCA institutions that I've been attached to start anti-racism teams. I've seen them take the step of doing anti-racism training and using a tool that, of course, the name of it is escaping me now because I'm trying to talk off the cuff to 100 some odd people. The shorthand for the tool is the IDI. I know that some of y'all know the full name and its worth. And it is about implicit bias. So some of those sort of things that we have in our schema that maybe we haven't thought to address or examine. There are tools that I've seen used in different expressions of the church that show that these are important issues that the church knows it should be dealing with. And the important part of this for me is that church leadership finds it important. And so church leadership is putting structures in place to begin anti-racism work. And to me, that's very, very important.
Totally. Like, it's so interesting. I mean, wow. Okay. So Robert,
we could, Sally, you and I could really, really talk.
I know. I have so many questions I want to ask. I'm really holding back now, so I'm just like, no. Yeah. So the next question is, when we consider the different theologies, disability, womenness, etc., do they convey a different nature of God within their spiritual beliefs?
Oh, that is such a good question. Different isn't necessarily the word I would choose. I would choose a word expansive. And I'm just going to lean on creation, like as my as like my proof of that. I am so compelled by a God that has created so much diversity. I don't know why. I can't know why, other than to know that God is something that I'm not going to figure out or understand. I'm not going to figure out or understand the majesty. But that majesty has us here. So there is something in my experience that I believe can teach me something about God that I might not understand and have that experience. And that can also teach everybody else something as well. Because the expansiveness of God is not just and the fact that, like, I have an approach to God that is somewhat contextual. Some people go either way on that. I believe that there is a way to find universality and particularity. I believe there is a particular experience that I have with God, and I believe that that experience can enrich my understanding and other people's understanding of God as well. And I'm afraid that if I didn't believe that, I might believe that we could just know it all. And to all of my systematic theologians out there, I fight a little bit with that, but I love systematics, and so it pushes me, because there is a want to sort of set down some sort of understanding of this thing that we cannot understand. But also we have these experiences that I think can enrich our understanding beyond sort of what a theory or even what a discipline can say. It's hard. It's really hard to explain some of it. It's a little bit like explaining the Trinity. I don't want to be, well, I know what I know, and that's all I need to hear, because that is not necessarily Lutheran tradition. It's not very rigorous. It would be nice to have some underpinning to it. And at the same time, there is a spiritual component to it all that is ineffable.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great if we had all the answers and if we could actually just know. I mean, so it's like, yeah, the nature of God is one thing, one mystery that we're all trying to learn about. And if suddenly we do know all of it, then I don't know. Well, it would be great. Well, Robert,
right? Would it really be great? Right.
I don't know. That's it. Like what? Like I don't know how the world would look like. You know, like yeah, it's just
right.
Yeah. It's I know it's these systematic points. It's so complicated. But
I really mean all love to my systematic theologians. I'm not trying to dismiss systematic theology.
I don't. Yeah. I don't.
My mind works. Yeah, my way I think, but I need systematic theology. You know, I need to sort of see some structure, and then see the God who is beyond it all.
Of course, we all do. I hope we do. I hope we all do. So Robert Seymour is saying, I accept that it is a good idea to use different analysis to maintain our attention. That said, isn't the embodiment concept really just re-emphasizing the need to understand one another in order to care for one another? Then Reverend Dorothy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, but then Reverend Dorothy commented on that if we don't name the specific embodiments, the norm will remain centered the way it has always been centered. Northern European white maleness. It is good to see the differences. So
that this is a wonderful exchange, Sally. Thank you for reading this exchange. Towards the end of the Bible study, I talked specifically about whose bodies are sad, whose bodies are in danger, whose bodies feel like empowered to embody something as opposed to whose bodies don't. I was trying to get at some of the things raised in this question. There is a need to understand one another, and I am a one another. Sally is a different a one another. Understanding me is not understanding Sally. Understanding Sally is not understanding me. Sally and I are in two very different parts of the world, I think. We didn't chat a lot before she came on this morning. Afternoon for me. I think it's very late for you. Mm-hmm. I think it's after 11 p.m. for you.
Yeah, now it's gonna get 11 p.m., but it's fine.
Okay.
Don't worry.
So there are the one another is a start. So, and oh gosh, we're getting low on time. Okay, my answers are getting a little rambly. I apologize. Part of my specific scholarship for my dissertation is looking at some of the things that we've been taught historically that need to be examined or just flat out unlearned. And it really does matter if your body looks like one that's been in danger. It really does matter if your body has been excluded for difference. There's a different level of code switching, of stress level. It's so yes, and is what I would say to the beginning of the question. And also, if it were just a really need for re-emphasis, we would probably all know each other better than we do. And so that is that's a little bit of my experience. So as, you know what, we are low on time. So I think I'm going to, I will make this my last point for this, and then I'll let Sally decide if we're gonna, as it's, trust me, it's more than understanding, just caring for one another. And when there is an opportunity that the church has given us to have have us as 4 scholars of color offer some new, maybe expansive ways to kind of push and look at things. When that opportunity is presented, I would commend it. I would commend it. So if it ends up stretching it a little bit for you, I'm glad. I hope that's good. Okay, Sally, I think I'm done rambling. I'll let you have it. Share the floor back.
Well, thank you, Denise. I don't know if you have one more thing you want to say, please go ahead. But I think you already. Yeah, I think you did great. With
I just want to say that this has been a wonderful opportunity. I'm very thankful to the church for giving not just me, but my friends who I have a lot of respect for, and a lot of love for letting the 4 of us share some reflections with you all. And I really do hope that they make an impact on the assembly, which is what this is all about. And the assembly's coming up very soon. And my prayers for a wonderful assembly, and prayers that this work that has been put together by the group that did this leads to fruit.
Yeah, that's true. I totally agree with you at this point. I want to thank everyone who made this all possible for us to be here, we all panelists. And we're all very thankful for this opportunity, and we're happy that we had these chances to talk to one another. And I hope one day we all get to meet at some point in person. Denise, you mentioned that embodiment means it's our encounter in our life. It's acting faithfully 24/7, kind of. It's not only 1 hour in church. I totally support that. And with that, I want to go for thanking everyone who joined us today. If you'd like to share the recording for this session with others, please direct them to the Churchwide Assembly playlist in the ELCA YouTube channel at youtube.com/ELCA. Remember to, and that is our final session for today. And you're having the list, you're having the link in the chat, and we all wish you a wonderful day. And thank you, and goodbye. Bye-bye.